Hi, I'm Carlin Borisenko. In early 2020, I was the knitting Democrat who accidentally went viral on the internet for going to a Trump rally and then left the party. I became the conservative darling, was on all the shows, traveled around the country, and then realized that conservatives were no better than Democrats. If there's one thing that I've learned, it's that both political tribes are two sides of the same coin. But it wasn't all bad. On my journey, I became obsessed with understanding the woke ideology and the culture war. I broke the story of the city of Seattle doing segregated training with its employees.
How bad has this stuff become? The city of Seattle has now put out, I'm not kidding you, this is according to Dr. Carolyn Borisenko, who's an organizational psychologist. The city of Seattle asked its white employees to voluntarily spend a day off in a training about their internalized racial superiority.
I broke the story that led to the first ever federal lawsuit against critical race theory in the schools. I broke the Coke Be Less White story, one of the biggest anti-woke stories of all time. It got over 30 million views. Coca-Cola's corporate headquarters even had to change their outgoing voicemail.
Throughout the past few days, you may have seen inaccurate reporting on the content of our recently launched diversity, equity, and inclusion training program.
I exposed the schools in Burlington, Vermont for grooming middle school children live on the internet. They called me an unwoke cult leader for that. And the Vermont Human Rights Commission slandered me publicly as being a hate channel. I even got called a hero in Breitbart for exposing that the Washington Post was writing a hit piece on Christopher Rufo. I have broken story after story after story about what's going on in the public schools, from Cambridge, Massachusetts, to autistic sex education, to the Department of Education in Michigan, literally training teachers all over the state how to groom children. I wrote a book called Actively Unwoke, the ultimate guide for fighting back against the woke insanity in your life. I host a podcast all about fighting back, and I'm downloading all of my knowledge to you on my Substack, carlin.substack.com. The world is a crazy place. We are literally surrounded by cults on all sides. On this show, we're going to do a deep dive into all aspects of the culture war, and I will show you the dark, dystopian underbellies on both sides. Here are the commitments I'll make to you. I will always tell you the truth. I will always bring you receipts. And if you stick with me, I promise you will see the world differently. Welcome to the cult. Please mount that like button for me and subscribe if you feel so inclined. Well, hello, everyone. Happy Thursday. Welcome to The Cult. The Cult is a show that I do on this here YouTube channel and on Odyssey, Rockfin, Rumble, all the other places as well, on Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, where we talk about all elements of the culture war. We talk about the woke left. We talk about the alt-right. We talk about everything in between. And because I think everyone is crazy, I have no tribe. I just tell you what I actually think is going on based on, I'm pretty sure, looking into things more than most people on the internet do. And so that's what we do here. And listen, this week apparently has been Barbie week. I didn't anticipate this being Barbie week. I really didn't anticipate it being Barbie week at all. If you had asked me last week at this time, Carlin, are you going to go see Barbie? I'd been like, fuck no. Like, why would I go see Barbie? And yet, I just got back from the movie theater, a little matinee. I have not actually been to a movie theater in a really long time. When was the last time I was in a movie theater? I'm pretty sure the last time I was in a movie theater was in Virginia in late 2020. So it has been at least 2.5 years since I have gone to a movie theater. And that streak ended today when I went to a matinee showing of Barbie. Now, I've been pontificating about how there is no way in this universe that Barbie is woke. There is no way. You know, the Daily Wire people, Ben Shapiro came out with a 45-minute rant about Barbie being woke. Matt Walsh has it as like a the ultimate feminist propaganda movie, and we're going to watch that today, and we'll see how that goes. But the thing of it is I didn't even need to see this movie to know that it was woke or was not woke, rather. Oh, God, slip there. That's going to come like someone's going to edit that out of context. I didn't even need to see this movie to know that it was not woke. And we kind of discussed some of the reasons the other day on the channel, but to be honest, I was in a little bit of a pissy mood. And so maybe I could have articulated those points better. And so we'll discuss some of those points again today. However, I always do believe in making sure. And if I'm going to spend days on the internet talking about Barbie, then I might as well actually go see the dang movie. And I did. And I have some things to say about it, Ben Shapiro. I got to tell you, I am really, 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 really disappointed in the conservative right. And I think the reason that I'm really disappointed, it's like one of those things where like, I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed. I thought we were all better than this. I thought we understood. I thought that we had a better grasp of what was going on in the world. You know, there was a time a couple years ago during 2020 when there was a study that came out. And basically, and I don't know if it came out in 2020 or it was just being talked about a lot in 2020, but it was definitely being talked about a lot in 2020, where this study came out and basically it said that the political left does not understand the political right. The political left doesn't listen to the political right. They can't make predictions about the political right. They can't do anything. But the political right does understand the political left, and they can make predictions about what the political left is going to do at any damn time. That study may have been accurate a couple years ago. That study's no longer accurate. I'm sorry. We have descended into the realm of absolute crazy town. If the political conservative right actually believes that Barbie is woke, there is nothing about this movie that could be considered woke if you are actually watching the movie for what it is, which is a satire, which is meant to be nostalgic and reminiscent about how young girls and their gay best friends, but mostly young girls, play with Barbies and how that is and the joy that Barbies bring to the lives of young girls. Like, that's what this movie was. This was a movie about nostalgia. This was a movie about, evoking those deeply emotional moments you have when you're kids and you're just playing with all your toys. And yes, young girls ignored Ken, okay? Okay? Because the point wasn't fucking Ken. And men can get pissed off all they want about how Ken was ignored and abused and a poor victim of the world, but the reality is that when you were a young girl, and I don't know if this still happens today, but this was my experience, and yes, I played with Barbies growing up, all right. My favorite Barbie was the one with the really long hair. And the hair was special, so the hair was supposed to, like, when you did a hairstyle on it, it was supposed to like stay, and it didn't really work, but it stayed better than like normal Barbie hair. Anyway, I played with Barbies too, and I know how this works. And I'll tell you what, no one cared about Ken. Okay, Ken dolls were a thing, they were around, but when young girls are playing with other young girls and they all have their Barbies, it is goddamn girl time. It is not time for men. Ken is an accessory in the land of Barbie, and Ken was also an accessory in the movie. And that is because the movie is supposed to I don't know how to explain this to people who didn't play with Barbies growing up. The entire movie, from everything from like when you first get shown around Barbie land, to when Barbie goes into the real world, to when Barbie brings real world people back into Barbie land and the Kens have taken over and there is a war for Barbie land. Every single part of that movie was reminiscent of how young girls played with Barbie. That's what that was. This was a movie made for women who grew up playing Barbie. This was not a movie that was made for men who did not grow up playing Barbie. And if you ever and don't tell me that young girls are somehow playing with Barbie wrong, because there's no such thing. And Heidi, I agree. And I was thinking about this on my drive home. It is mind-boggling to me that this needs to be explained to people. It really is. This entire movie was a make-believe movie. This like do you guys understand that like when you're young, girls versus boys is like a thing, right? It is. And so when you have the Kens versus the Barbies, that is a classic boy girl like childhood game that is played. When you have the big war of the Barbies and the Kens, that is what happens when you have a whole bunch of Barbie dolls and a whole bunch of G.I. Joes or Ken or whatever the hell, and maybe you even had the big G.I. Joes, because the bigger G.I. Joes, like the normal size G.I. Joes, came out when I was a kid. And so there were not only Ken dolls running around, there were also these normal size G.I. Joes. And you play with all of them at the same time, and sometimes you make believe up a scenario where it's boys versus girls. This entire movie was make believe. It was meant to evoke nostalgia. I'm going to tell you this too. It did evoke nostalgia. I cried twice. I did. I admit it. I cried twice during this movie because like there were just some parts that were so on the nose that I was like, were you at my cousin's house growing up when we were all playing Barbies? Because I'm starting to feel like I'm having a moment, a tear stream down my cheek. I swear to God. This was a movie about creativity and imagination. This was not a movie about the patriarchy. And I'll tell you what, at the end of the movie, Ben Shapiro magically left this out of his little review. At the end of the movie, the woman who created Barbie, who is now guiding Barbie into the real world, she flat out says the patriarchy is a made up concept. That is in the movie. So all these people, all these conservatives who are screaming and crying, the movie said the word patriarchy. Conservatives are so triggered by the word patriarchy, simply by the word patriarchy, that they don't listen to everything else that is around the word patriarchy, because they were mocking the idea of the existence of a patriarchy. And Ben Shapiro in his review wanted to be like, well, you know, it was so easy for the men to come in and take over the world. Do you know why Ken went I'm going to be giving away plot lines in this movie, but it will not ruin the movie for you if you haven't seen it, to be honest, because the whole point of the movie is to make you feel that emotional feeling of when you were playing with Barbies, and you should all go. If you played with Barbies as a kid, you should go. Even if you don't want to admit you played with Barbies as a kid, you should go, because it's fucking great. Do you know why Ken had to go back to Barbie Land to take over Barbie Land because, okay, so here's what happened. Barbie Land is a matriarchy, okay? The women control everything in Barbie Land because when you are a young girl and you are playing with Barbie, the point is to play with Barbies. All right? So, of course, in Barbie Land, the Barbies are going to rule Barbie Land because that is the entire point of playing with Barbies as a young girl, is that Barbie is every girl and every girl wants to be Barbie and there's a Barbie for everyone. And you can dress up your Barbie, you can do this with that Barbie, you can do that with Barbie. Ken was an accessory to Barbie. Ken was not the point. So, what happens in the movie is Barbie has to go to the real world. And Ken has no identity without Barbie. Ken is obviously in love with Barbie. He follows Barbie everywhere. He wants Barbie to be in love with him. Is actually something really endearing about it. Ken doesn't understand who he is without Barbie, right? So when Barbie goes to the real world, Ken basically like goes with her, but like not by her choice. Like he kind of like he snuck his way into the car and announced like when they were already on their way to the real world, and Barbie said, "Fine, you can come to the real world with me." Fine. So they get into the real world. And Ken starts to realize that he as a man is a lot more quote unquote respected in the real world than he was in Barbie Land. Okay? And he kind of likes this. He's like, this woman asked me the time and she called me sir. And he kind of likes this. He's like, and it's basically a contrast of like Barbie didn't pay attention to Ken. Well, now some people are paying attention to Ken. And then Ken goes and finds a book about the patriarchy. But the ironic thing is that Ken doesn't really care about the patriarchy. Ken cares about horses. I don't really understand the horse stuff. Did Ken like? I don't understand the horse references. Maybe this is. I didn't have a Ken doll. My cousin had a Ken doll. I didn't really care about Ken. I don't know if there's like a horse thing around Ken. I don't know. But Ken is obsessed with horses. But at some point, he also gets a book that explains the patriarchy to him. And then he thinks this is this big epiphany. He's like, men rule the world. I can do anything I want here simply by being a man. And then what Ken does is Ken tries to go and get a job. Ken goes to try to get like a job at like a big time corporation. He just walks into like a company. He's like, "Can you give me some high level do nothing job that pays me lots of money?" And they're like, "No, you need an MBA for that." And then Ken tries to go to the hospital to be a doctor, and he walks in. He's like, "Will you hire me as a doctor to do a surgery?" And the woman doctor that he's talking to is like, "No, because you're not a doctor, we're not going to hire you." So what I'm saying here is that Ken discovered the patriarchy, literally tried to take advantage of the patriarchy that conservatives are all wound up about. Ken tries to take advantage of the patriarchy in the real world, and he finds out, and I shit you not, Ken discovers that the real world has not implemented the patriarchy correctly. Because Ken can't just like waltz into any company and get a job just for being a man. He can't just waltz right into a hospital without, being a and getting a job without being a doctor. Ken actually comes to the conclusion that the real world has not implemented patriarchy correctly. Like they had like the right idea of like men being in charge, but they implemented it wrong because he couldn't get anything he wanted just by being a man. And so he comes to that conclusion that the they like it's kind of like the argument of like real socialism has never been tried. That was exactly what I was thinking in my head. This is like in Ken's head, this is like the real patriarchy has never been tried. And so Ken's like, "You know what? Since they screwed up the patriarchy in the real world, I'm going to go back to Barbie Land and I'm going to implement the patriarchy correctly." That's why he goes back to Barbie Land, because the patriarchy in the real world doesn't work. So he goes back to Barbie Land and he explains the patriarchy to all the men. And then the men come in because the women are not paying attention. And the men come in and they take over all the women's dream homes, and they redecorate all of the women's dream homes to like have man things and like horses and beers and stuff like that. And they convince the women to like serve them beers on the beach or whatever, and to basically look after them like Ken felt like he should have been in the real world. Oh, and I joke in the middle of it. Oh my god, hang on. Jesus. So the women, because the women have never lived in a world before where like people weren't just nice to each other and did things for each other. The women were like, "Yeah, Ken, we don't mind doing this." It was like their defenses were down. They didn't know that the Kens were trying to rule them, because I don't think the women actually ever consciously tried to rule the Kens. It was just like, this is Barbie Land. This is what we do here. This is the whole purpose of this thing. So the Kens got the women to like bring them beers and do that sort of stuff, and they created their own patriarchal society. Well, Barbie comes back, and of course the whole society is a mess. Men have it's basically like the difference between like a men's bathroom and a woman's bathroom, right? Men have created messes everywhere. Men have redecorated and have horrible taste. And it's like, and you know what the thing is there was actually something sweet about it, because all the men really all they wanted, all the Kens wanted, was to have Barbie's attention. That was it. None of them cared. They didn't really. I mean, you find this out as like the movie plays out. Ken didn't really want to be in charge. Like the men didn't really want to be in charge. They just wanted attention from the Barbies. That was all it was about. And so the women, because they knew that the Kens just wanted attention from them, used that to distract the Kens, to get them to fight each other so that the women could go and fix everything that the men had broken. Which is exactly something that would happen if you were playing a game with Barbies. And again, like you guys, anyone who played with toys growing up understands what this is. This is like this is kind of like if you had a day where like maybe it was raining outside or something, and so everyone's kind of like stuck in, maybe this is just my childhood. Like everyone, it's raining outside, and so I'm over at my cousin's house, and when I was at my cousin's house, because my grandmother babysat us like at all the kids in the family at my cousin's house, and we all went down to the basement. Okay, because the basement was just where we hung out. Is where the TV was. It was where the fucking Barbies and the Dream Hosts were. It was where the GI Joes were. All the toys were in the basement. All right. So it's one of those rainy days, and you have the female cousins and the male cousins all stuck in the basement together, and there's Barbies on one side and there's GI Joes on the other side, and you have like a fucking war. You play a game. That's what this movie was. Like, I don't know how better to explain this. This movie was just make believe. It was, if anything, it was making fun of the idea of the patriarchy, because literally Ken didn't believe that the real world had actually implemented the patriarchy correctly. And then when he tried to implement it, he was easily overthrown because he didn't actually really care about it. And the Barbies at the end decided to treat the Kens better than they were, because they understood that Kens have feelings too, and you got to treat them better than how you've been treating them, because they're ultimately like good guys that literally just wanted Barbie's attention. That was all it was. Got a super chat here from Chris. Have anything to say about Sinead O'Connor? I really don't. I mean, I guess rest in peace. I was never like a Sinead O'Connor person, to be honest, but a lot of people were. And so if she was your favorite, I guess I'm sorry. She died really young, so that's really sad. But I really don't have that much to say about it, Chris. I'm sorry. I wish I had more. Let me see, just scrolling through the chat. So, the moral of the story on this one is that and so going back to what I said at the beginning of being like, I'm not I'm not angry conservatives. I'm just really disappointed. This is a movie that conservatives should have lifted up. This is a movie that glorifies femininity, even if Barbie has a job outside the home, even if Barbie is president or an astronaut or a lawyer or a doctor or a scientist or some sort of leadership Barbie. Barbie glorified femininity in this movie. Like, the star of the movie is the classic stereotypical Barbie archetype. Conservatives should have loved that. Conservatives should have loved that this movie was clearly and obviously making fun of the idea of the patriarchy, because it quite literally said at the end of the movie, the patriarchy is a made up concept. Barbie is a made up concept. The patriarchy is a made up concept. Like, it could not have been more clear. And the fact that Ben Shapiro, like, completely just like spaced on that, like, Ben Shapiro actually complained about the conversation, because the whole context of this is like, so Barbie had to like escape from the Mattel CEOs, and Barbie ended up in the office of like the ghost of the creator of Barbie, and they had a nice cup of tea and they had a conversation, and the creator of Barbie like showed her how to get out of the building, right? Well, later in the movie, the creator of Barbie comes back to explain. She's like, I didn't look like Barbie. Barbie wasn't supposed to look like me. Barbie wasn't supposed to look like anyone except for Barbie. Like, and she also, I mean, like, and so the context of this is like, Barbie has decided she wants to be in the real world now, so she's walking into the real world with the creator, where all Barbie has to do to go to the real world is decide, because it's make believe, you make it up. So she's going to the real world with the creator, and the creator literally says to her, the woman who Ben Shapiro was like, they just brought this woman in for nostalgia. The creator literally says to Barbie, the patriarchy is a made up concept, just like Barbie. Like, these things are in our heads. So if we want to change, if we want to do something differently, all we need to do is decide to do it differently. Like, this is an empowering message. Like, you can be whatever you want to be. All of these things that society tells you are real, all of these made up ideas, these made up rules that tell you how to live and how to show up in the world, you get to decide how you show up in the world. It was blasting the idea of a patriarchy in the face. And so conservatives, you really need to not be so triggered by a single effing word, and actually listen to the context of it, because this movie is like, honestly, one of the most wholesome movies that I've seen in a really effing long time. We're going to talk more about it in a second. Nick said, saw it with my daughter, was more entertaining than I thought. My daughter liked it, and I related to the mother-daughter interactions because I had the same interactions with my daughters in my life. Isn't that funny? Isn't that funny? Thank you for the super chat, Nick, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. I really did enjoy this movie. There were many times that I laughed out loud. It was funny. It really was. And I'm like, I'm not, this is like not normally my type of movie, but it, like, there were like good, like legitimate LOL moments in this movie. Vince says, I think you just encapsulated why conservatives don't like the movie in general. Barbie is ultra feminine. She's not a feminist. This is not true. Barbie is not a feminist. Like, men think that Barbie is a feminist because, and this is the other point I wanted to make. So Vince, I'm glad you brought this up. Here's why I'm really disappointed in conservatives. because conservatives are appropriating the word woke to mean anything that is not conservative Christian values. Barbie is not a feminist. Barbie does not hate men. Barbie just prefers hanging out with women. That's it. They have the whole point of Barbie is girls playing together, doing girl things in girl spaces. It is not a feminist movie. It is not shitting on men. There is no point in the movie where Barbie is shitting on men. Barbie just prefers to hang out with women because that is what the game is. And there's nothing wrong with that, guys. There's nothing woke about that. We're talking about young girls playing with dolls with other young girls. It is a game meant for girls. It is a girls' space. Boys have G.I. Joes or He-Man or superheroes or any of those things. You guys don't understand. The only really far-ranging toy that was specifically targeted towards women or girls, I guess, when I was growing up was Barbie. When you went into a toy store when I was growing up, there were aisles of G.I. Joes. There were aisles of fucking Star Wars and models and models that you put together like cars and things. There were aisles of superhero stuff. There was one aisle for girls growing up, and most of that aisle was taken up with Barbie. Barbie was the toys that girls had when they wanted to be girls. And there were other things, like there were My Little Ponies running around. Hang on. There were My Little Ponies running around. There were My Little Ponies, there were Care Bears, there were Cabbage Patch Kids, but you got to admit that those toys were mostly in the stuffed animal aisle, which was basically kind of like a mixed gendered aisle of toys. There was one aisle that was so pink and had all the fucking accessories, and there was one aisle that girls spent the time in, and that was Barbie, okay? My point is with this is that the fact that conservatives are believe that Barbie was shitting on men, no. Barbie was not shitting on Ken. Barbie at the end said they should be treating the Kens better. Maybe it's not as though they don't think Ken is bad. They just prefer hanging out with the other Barbies. That's it. People are allowed to have preferences. I, in real life, generally prefer hanging out with men than I do with women. That's not to say I won't hang out with women every once in a while. I do have things that I do with groups of women, but I just generally prefer hanging out with men because I tend to get along better with men than I do with women. Some men prefer to hang out, like gay men mostly, prefer to hang out with women than they do with men. Some men prefer to hang out with other men and have guys' nights. Some women prefer to hang out with other women and drink wine on the weekends. Just because you prefer to hang out with women and spend time with women and do women things does not mean you're a feminist. It just means that you prefer hanging out with women. I don't know how to explain this any better. So, so that idea is garbage. The other thing I'm gonna so Barbie also at the end of the movie encourages Ken to find himself. Now, here's the thing. It is not Barbie's fault that Ken has built his identity around being with Barbie, okay? Barbie didn't ask Ken to build. Basically, Ken is very codependent in the movie. And I think women can attest to this. When men are codependent, it's kind of annoying. I mean, I bet men can attest this too. Like, I'm sure when women are codependent with men, it's kind of annoying sometimes. Sometimes it's all right. Sometimes it's nice. And then sometimes it gets annoying and you want them to go home because you want to be able to do things without them. I was texting with someone a couple weeks ago. Hang on. I was texting with someone a couple weeks ago that was it was a guy that was complaining about, like, girls, like, in his life, and how he, like, was, like, less than impressed with, like, girls in his life. And he said, like, "They don't want you to go have fun. They don't want you to go have fun without them. Like, they're always clingy. They always wanna know what you're doing." Like, that's annoying, right? So, in the Barbie movie, that was Ken to Barbie. So, of course, like, Ben Shapiro was like, "Well, Barbie's just annoyed by Ken. She doesn't even like Ken." Well, no, Ken was being annoying to Barbie. And the reason that Ken was being annoying to Barbie is that Ken did not have his own sense of identity separately than Barbie. So, it's not as though Barbie was shitting on him. In fact, Barbie at the end of the movie gave Ken really, 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 really sound advice, which is, "Ken, you need to go and find yourself." This whole movie is basically about Barbie going through an existential crisis because the woman who was playing with Barbie in the real world was also going through an existential crisis, which, I'm sorry, happens when you reach a certain age and you get nostalgic about things and you're like, "Oh, reminiscing back to your childhood about how simpler things were." So the woman in the real world is going through the existential crisis. So because she's going through that crisis and she's playing with the Barbies as she's going through that crisis, Barbie goes through the same existential crisis. So throughout the movie, you watch Barbie have her own journey. Barbie evolves and grows and finds out more about herself through the course of the movie. At the end of the movie, after they have defeated the Kens, after the Barbies have reclaimed Barbie World, Ken and her have a conversation in which Ken flat out says, he's like, "I didn't even like leading Barbie World. I just liked horses." Like, I don't really know what that means, but okay. And Barbie says to Ken, "Ken, you need to go and find yourself. You need to find yourself separate from me." It's not as though Barbie was, like, breaking up with Ken, because they didn't break up, but it was like, "We need to exist as individuals, and you need to have your own identity." Guys, the fact that conservatives think this is an example of feminism or woke is one of the most ridiculous things that I've ever heard in my life, because everyone's goal should be to stand on their own 2 feet as an individual and to find themselves as an individual, and that is exactly what Barbie told Ken to do. It is not feminist to do that. Now, if Barbie had told Ken, "Ken, this is what you need to do in the world, and you need to know your place, and you need to do this, that, and the other thing, and don't disrupt what the women are doing, Ken." Okay, well, that might have been a little feminist, but this movie was not feminist. This was simply just two adults having a conversation about, like, "I've been on a little bit of a journey here. I think that you could benefit from going on a similar journey, and, we can exist together. We can hang out. We can still play together in whatever manner they define play, all right? But there's no sex in Barbie Land, though. But, like, you need to go and be your own person, and that's actually really good advice. That is the opposite of woke. Like, the fact that the moral of the story is, Ken, you need to be your own person, is the opposite of feminism. I'm sorry. Like, it's so stupid. Rottweiler says Barbie wasn't feminist. It was about giving girls a power fantasy without being political. The late second wave feminists and the third wave feminists. Well, this is my other point. It's like, going back to the idea that conservatives are redefining the term woke to mean anything that doesn't adhere to conservative Christian values. Like, guys, it is not feminist, it is not woke for a woman to enjoy being a woman, to enjoy spending time with other women, to enjoy having a job outside the home, to enjoy having a life outside the home. It is not woke if a woman does not want to have kids. It is not woke if a woman doesn't want to get married when she's in her early 20s. It is not woke for a woman to have a job. These are all aspects of individualism. Some women are not going to want to have kids. I don't want to have kids. I like my money and I like my freedom. I don't want to. That doesn't mean I'm a woke feminist. Some women are going to want to have jobs outside the home and some women aren't. And the movie actually says that. The movie at the end was like, can we just have like a normal Barbie? And maybe she has kids and maybe she doesn't. And maybe she's a mom because that's a good thing to be. And maybe she decides not to be. The end of the movie was like, can we create the least political form of Barbie ever that's just like a woman in the world? Like, that would be pretty great. And Mattel was like, yes, we can do that. Yes, we can. Conservatives are calling it woke because they're triggered by the word patriarchy. They're annoyed that they perceived it to be like, I don't even know. The fact that conservatives consider this to be woke is really effing disturbing to me because it says that something has gone horribly, horribly, horribly wrong. I'm going to tell you this too. Ben Shapiro, in his review, said that the reason that this movie was targeted towards young girls is because of the previews. The previews are how you know, because I went to the movie and all I saw were previews for movies for kids. Well, I'll tell you what, I just went to see the movie. Do you know what previews I saw in the movie? Number one, I saw The Hunger Games, this new Hunger Games prequel that's coming out, which, by the way, this movie looks awesome. Actually, every movie I saw a preview for looked actually pretty good. Like this new Hunger Games movie that's coming out, I fucking love The Hunger Games. It looks so cool. It's like a prequel where President Snow is like a coach on the Hunger Games at the 10th Hunger Games. And it's just like, it looks really, 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 really good. And I'm really excited about it. But that's not a movie for kids. The Hunger Games is a movie for adults. So that wasn't targeted at kids. The second preview that I saw was for this movie. I think it's called The Challengers. It has Zendaya in it. And this is probably like the only thing I've ever seen Zendaya in that I don't think she would annoy the ever loving hell out of me. Because so is this movie about this woman tennis player, and there are two men, and apparently they have like a threesome or something, and they're both competing for her attention. And then like years later, there's an injury. It's like a movie about like the relationships between these three people, I think, and then there's tennis involved and stuff like that. That movie looked great too. I want to see it. I still don't think that was a preview for kids. And then the next preview that was on the movie was for Gran Turismo, which is about like video game stars who learn to drive race cars in real life. I mean, I suppose you could make the argument that maybe that's for like teenagers, but it was not for kids. So none of the previews that I saw in this movie were targeted at kids. So Ben Shapiro's theory that this is a movie that was obviously and clearly targeted at young girls, like based on the previews that he saw when he saw the movie, just goes completely out the window because I saw completely different previews. So I don't know how they picked the previews or why Ben Shapiro thinks that's an indication of anything, but he is obviously and clearly wrong. What else do I have to say about this? I just think it's garbage. I think the movie was great. I think the conservative backlash to this movie is absolute garbage, and it's just indicative of the fact that conservatives do not know what they're fighting. This was a movie that was made for women who played with Barbies. That's who this was for. It was definitely like, I mean, I wouldn't call it an adult movie. I think that teenagers could probably get some enjoyment out of it as well. I don't think young kids could like really understand this in the way that their moms are going to understand it. But yeah, I mean, they probably don't even care. They do just want the clicks. Oh, about the dance number. I fucking loved it. I loved every part of this movie. I really did. I loved every part of this movie. I loved the dance number at the end with the Kens. It was so great. It was so fucking perfect. And the fact that Ben Shapiro doesn't understand what that dance sequence was perfect. Ben Shapiro should never be allowed to review movies again. anything that Ben Shapiro says about a movie from this point forward is that is considered suspect so far as I'm concerned. Well, I actually have Brett Cooper's review pulled up, Sarah. We might watch it. Brett had a hot take was really, really bad concerning a woman who was advocating for people who need wheelchairs and got it so wrong, and I really can't stand her now. I don't know what that's about, Sarah. Yes, this was a bonding movie for mothers and daughters. And the fact that conservative men are trying to ruin this, guys, it was really lovely. It really was. I'm not joking when I say I cried. They were genuine tears. There was like one sequence, I think, where it was like just like the sequence of like, playing with Barbies and like all this stuff. And it was just like, oh my God. And these are memories. Like, I think the reason I cried is like these are memories that I have not thought about probably in 20 years. I mean, it's been a while. So, like, I strongly recommend this movie. I thought this movie was great. If you played with Barbies growing up, you have got to see it. You really do. You're gonna love it. And so I think Ben Shapiro's review is crap. I do. But while we are still here, I want to just like check in on some other things. So I've got pulled up here. I did this just to have a little something to react to. So I searched for what Matt Walsh said about Barbie, and Matt Walsh apparently says Barbie bombs innocent families with feminist propaganda. And I thought maybe we could watch that and I could react to it. Do you guys want to do that? Just to see. Um But guys, please do mount that like button for me if you have not already. If you enjoyed Barbie, and even if you didn't, but you think I'm making some good points, please make sure to mount that like button. And let's see what Matt Walsh, because again, I don't think that this movie was feminist. This movie was absolutely not feminist. This movie upheld all of the virtues of society. It was not shitting on men. It was not like feminists are probably going to effing hate this movie if we're honest about it. But let's see what Matt Walsh had to say about it. We talked about Ben Shapiro the other day. Let's see.
Last week, we discussed the impending doom of Hollywood. As the media was frantically warning us, the entire entertainment industry was on the verge of collapse thanks to a writer's strike, an actor's strike, and a series of supposed blockbusters that turned out to be flops. And this was, in some ways, an ironic combination of factors, given that the quality and performance of these movies would seem to indicate that the writers and actors had already been on strike for many decades. The average viewer will come out of the latest Hollywood dud hear that the
Can I just say so too? Like he's talking about how Hollywood is shit now. So I explained the movies that I saw previews for, which were like Hunger Games and The Challengers, with that tennis movie with Zendaya, and Gran Turismo. I got to say this too. Even during the previews, I was kind of tearing up a little bit, not in the same way as I did during the Barbie movie, but like the reason I was just like so happy with the previews, I was like, these are not woke movies. Honestly, every single preview I saw for the Barbie movie, I was like, this movie actually looks good. It looks like a good story. It doesn't look woke to me. Maybe it has a woke line in it, but like I am willing to live with a woke line here and there if a story is good and they're actually putting effort into the story and they're just covering the story. Yes, Gran Turismo is a movie now. And so I was actually really excited. I was like, they're not like woke. These movies don't look woke. Is Hollywood actually making a comeback? Are we just going to tell good stories again? I was excited. I am feeling enthusiastic about the direction of the entertainment industry. Rottweiler says conservatives don't understand pop culture because they don't produce any. True. Honest question. What have they done besides Veggie Tales and Bible Man? And Daily Wire movies don't become iconic after a few months. Yup, I completely agree with you. The reason that conservatives don't understand what the Barbie movie is, which is a satire that is meant to be nostalgic for women who played with Barbies, is because they themselves do not create art. They don't understand these things. Maybe onesies and twosies do here and there. I'm not saying like this on an individual level. On a collective level, though, they really don't get it.
writers had been on strike or just went on strike and respond, wait, the movie had writers? It already seems like these films are being generated by AI, and now they really will be. And I don't think we'll be able to tell much of a difference when that happens. So it has been a gloomy time in Hollywood all around, but this weekend has given them a glimmer of hope. A false hope, I think, and a hope that will teach them all the wrong lessons, but hope all the same. The Hollywood Reporter declares a box office stunner, a historic weekend for movies. They report, quote, the summer box office just went nuclear. Filmmaker Greta Gerwig's female-fueled Barbie opened to a historic $155 million domestically, a threshold usually reserved for male-driven superhero fare or marquee IP, such as the final Harry Potter movie. It came in well ahead of an expected $90 million to $110 million and helped fuel one of the biggest weekends in history. Barbie, which brings to life Mattel's iconic fashion doll, is also strutting to big numbers overseas. The pick launched to an impressive $182 million from 70 markets for a global bow of $337 million against a $145 million production budget. In North America, Barbie scored the biggest domestic start ever for a movie directed by a woman, solo or otherwise. After gushing for several more paragraphs about Barbie, the article does mention that Christopher Nolan's film Oppenheimer also opened this weekend to an enormous haul, raking in $80 million. This makes it Nolan's biggest opening weekend for any of his non-Batman films. Especially impressive, far more impressive than Barbie's performance, as we'll see, because his movie...
So Matt Walsh is upset that Oppenheimer did worse than Barbie at the box office, and they aren't talking about Oppenheimer first. Listen, man, like, you want to complain about the patriarchy, the patriarchy. Matt Walsh right now is quite literally arguing that men, the movie made by the man, should have more accolades than Barbie, even though Barbie did better. Matt Walsh right now is arguing for a literal patriarchy that puts merit aside, because on sheer numbers, on merit, Barbie did significantly better than Oppenheimer, and I want to see Oppenheimer. I do, because Cillian Murphy is beautiful, and I will watch anything Cillian Murphy does, anything. So I'm going to go see Oppenheimer at some point. But, like, the fact that Matt Walsh just argued that Oppenheimer actually did better than Barbie when that is provably not true, that is what a patriarchy is, guys.
Is an original 3-hour R-rated historical drama. It is very difficult to make that kind of film into a smash hit. People don't generally flock to theaters to watch incredibly long character studies about historical figures. That is unprecedented, or nearly so. There is, however, plenty of precedent for moviegoers crowding theaters to watch.
I have watched Peaky Blinders, but I haven't watched all of it. I watched, I think, like I watched up until I won't give away a spoiler for people who haven't seen it. I think I watched like the first 4 seasons of it, and I want to go back and watch it. He is so fucking hot in Peaky Blinders. Honestly.
Movies based on familiar brands. Okay, it's not really historic. Audiences are increasingly becoming bored with franchise films and brand films, as Indiana Jones and The Flash and Little Mermaid and many others have discovered. But if there is a brand with a large and dedicated fan base that hasn't had its own film in a long time, then it'll probably do pretty well in its opening weekend. And that's the story with Barbie. The movie is a smash hit because Barbie, as a brand, is a smash hit.
Yes.
The quality of the film doesn't make a difference. The
quality of the film was phenomenal. The quality of the film was exactly what the film needed to be. And I'm sorry, the fact that, again, you don't understand what playing with Barbies was for girls, Matt. And I don't care how many kids you've got running around, and I don't care that you're married to a woman, and I don't care that you made a movie called What is a Woman. You have clearly learned nothing about what Barbies mean to young girls. The quality of the film could not have been better so far as I'm concerned. I thought it was great. And I didn't even want to see it a week ago. The only reason I saw it was because of assholes like you making such a big deal.
The acting, the writing,
Beautiful.
None of that factors into the equation.
Perfect. It was
okay.
Awesome.
It could have just been a movie where you're literally staring at a Barbie doll sitting in the corner.
Wrong.
And because it's called Barbie, it would have made $150 million. Mothers and daughters did not file.
This is like the biggest cope I've ever seen in my life.
into the theaters over the weekend because they really wanted to see what Greta Gerwig cooked up. Nor did they come because they were big Margot Robbie fans. They came because it's Barbie. It's a brand they like. And American consumers are conditioned to salivate whenever their favorite brand rings the bell. This weekend was not really a vindication of Hollywood or the filmmakers behind Barbies, but rather, if anything, a vindication of Pavlov and his dogs. Barbie's box office.
He is literally comparing women to Pavlov's dog. Guys, if you wonder why women don't like conservatives and women believe that conservatives like Matt Walsh don't like women, it is quite literally because Matt Walsh just compared women who played with Barbies growing up and wanted to watch a nostalgic movie about Barbie because women don't get movies like this all that often, Matt, no matter what you say. You just compared them to Pavlov's dog. If you wonder why women take issue with what conservative men say about them, it's because, generally speaking, women don't like being compared to dogs.
Office performance is a result of conditioning and not much else. Now, if anyone deserves the credit, though, for the biggest box office debut for any female director in history, it is not the female director, but the marketing department. Because they're the ones who knew enough to lie about the true content and message of the film.
How did they lie?
Because as we've now discovered, though it shouldn't really have come as a surprise to anyone, the Barbie movie is a preachy feminist screed about taking down the patriarchy.
That is completely the effing opposite of what it is. It is making fun of the patriarchy and the whole concept of the patriarchy throughout the entire effing movie. How did Barbie lie in its marketing? Because I watched the preview for Barbie last night, and it was pretty reflective of the movie that I saw this afternoon. I watched the other night, a whole 7-minute video all about the set for Barbie's dream house that they created that pretty much showed exactly what the movie was. Every single thing. I spent about an hour and a half on Instagram last night watching the marketing reels for Barbie to get some sense of, like, did they really mismarket this movie? No. All of the Instagram reels reflected exactly what the movie was. No one was tricked into seeing this movie. I promise you. The only people who are confused about what this movie was and what this movie was supposed to be are conservative men who can't keep their fucking noses out of women's spaces. Matt, we never needed you to come and save us, Matt. We just needed you to stay out of women's spaces. Is that so hard, Matt? You tell trans women to stay out of women's spaces all the time. You made a whole movie shitting on trans women, telling them, like, what is a woman? 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 When it turns out that the real person who couldn't stay out of women's spaces and women's things was Matt fucking Walsh.
Is a gender studies lecture in Barbie packaging. And I know this not because I watched the film. I'd rather jump feet first into a wood chipper than sit through.
He didn't even watch the movie that he's talking about. I'm shocked that Matt Walsh didn't even watch the effing movie.
That film. I don't need to watch Barbie to know that it's bad. For the same reason that I don't need to pull a rotten onion out of the garbage and eat it in order to know that I won't like the taste.
Wow.
I've never thrown myself into a volcano, but I feel that I can safely say that the experience would be unpleasant and probably a little hot. So some books can be judged by their covers, absolutely, or at least by their.
If you want to know why the Daily Wire is grossly misinforming its audience about what woke is and what feminism is and what's going on in pop culture, and you want to know why the Daily Wire's audience, I'm sorry for anyone that watches them, but are some of the stupidest goddamn people on the internet who have no idea what's actually going on, it's because Matt Walsh feels the need to pontificate about things he doesn't even bother to take the time to watch. When I was pontificating about Barbie for 2 days before I saw the movie, it's because I researched what the plot was. I talked to about 15 different people who saw it. I had a pretty good sense of what this movie was, and what the movie was is exactly what it turned out to be. I at least did my research and I did my homework. I watched videos about it. I watched the trailers. I watched all the marketing stuff. I was coming from a place where I had actually done probably more work than going to watch the movie to understand what Barbie was when I was talking about it. Matt Walsh is like, I'm not even going to bother seeing it. It's just obviously a piece of feminist propaganda. Go F yourself, Matt. Do some of the basic homework that you would rip someone apart if they didn't do when they came to you.
Back covers where you find the description. And we now have descriptions of the Barbie movie, which make the themes clear. Something that the marketing never did, and intentionally so. Fox reports, quote, Hollywood movie critics are widely praising Barbie as the most unwavering feminist summer blockbuster ever to exist, giving the new film particular adoration for its messaging around the patriarchy and gender roles.
And that messaging, for people who came in late and didn't hear me say this earlier, the messaging about the patriarchy was that the patriarchy was not implemented correctly in the real world because men really couldn't get everything that they wanted. That when they tried to implement the patriarchy in Barbie land, it didn't really work. And it ended up with men and women basically deciding that they all needed to treat each other better. And at the end of the movie, the creator of Barbie literally says, this is a quote from the movie, the patriarchy is a made-up concept. Again, conservatives are so triggered by the word patriarchy that they completely ignored the entire context of why they were talking about the patriarchy, which was to mock the idea that the patriarchy even existed. It is a satire. They are not endorsing the patriarchy. They're not shitting on men. They are mocking the entire idea. They literally say it doesn't exist at the end of the movie. What more did conservatives want? Did conservatives want a big blinking sign saying, we don't believe in the patriarchy in the actual movie? Is that what they expected? Because they kind of had that with the maker of Barbie saying the patriarchy doesn't exist, and that apparently is not good enough.
The film starring Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling boasts a strong 89% critic score at Rotten Tomatoes, with many reviews surprised by director Greta Gerwig's willingness to engage in extensive social commentary. So surprising. A Hollywood film director is engaging in political commentary? No one's ever heard of such a thing. Quote, once an equal parts fascinating and controversial Mattel toy, both loved and hated, a tiny waisted, vacuously smiling, slender doll designed like a straight male fantasy, is now the complicated feminist symbol of empowerment in Gerwig's hands, the rap wrote. Quote, but we aren't talking about an empty you go girl kind of empowerment here. That would be too simple-minded for Gerwig, whose articulate and accessible feminism has always been fiercely...
How is this movie a feminist movie? How is giving women something that is nostalgic specifically for women, that is about women feeling good about themselves, like, that's all it is? Is women... do conservatives think that women feeling good about themselves is like a feminist thing now? Are women not supposed to feel good about themselves? Oh, I'm sorry. Conservatives only want women to define themselves in relation to men. It's kind of like conservatives are projecting all of their feelings about what they want in the world onto a movie that has nothing to do with what they're talking about at all. The right can't let the women have anything.
Multifaceted and complex. Barbie is both a master's thesis on feminism and an Austin Powers-esque romp, the Globe and Mail noted.
Well, I'll agree with this too. if people are celebrating that Greta Gerwig made a movie that is like, they're considering like a social commentary and support it, like supporting the idea of the patriarchy, they didn't watch the fucking movie either. Because like, if you really think that movie is like a down with the patriarchy type movie, I'm sorry, you didn't watch the movie either. So the left is probably getting it wrong. The right is getting this wrong. Both sides are getting it wrong again. Yes, isn't this what conservatives wanted? Women to have women things and men to have men things. That is the entire effing point.
The Wrap also stated that the movie delivers a fierce feminist statement dressed in pink, while the Globe and Mail declared that the film, quote, most captivating and unwaveringly feminist summer blockbuster ever to exist. Meanwhile, IndieWire praised the film's outside-the-box and funny feminist fantasia and singled out Gosling's performance of newfound male rage and patriarchal power as a particular highlight.
That is the most laughable thing I've ever heard in newfound male rage. And by the way, conservatives are also so triggered by this movie. They're triggered by the word feminist that, again, they are so triggered by the word feminist that they don't even bother to actually investigate what they're talking about. The fact that they're saying that Ryan Gosling's performance was newfound male rage. Ryan Gosling was literally following Barbie around that entire movie, just wanting Barbie to pay attention to him. He is like this like lovable, like kind of sad, kind of pathetic, but like you're also like, oh, poor Ken. Like it's like there is nothing rage filled about Ryan Gosling. Even when Ryan Gosling as Ken was taking over Barbie Land and taking over Barbie's dream house and redecorating it as a saloon with all things horse, Ken was still like a likable guy. He was still like it's one of those things in which like he's acting out for attention, and like adults who have children should know what this looks like. He's not trying to do anything bad. He's not angry. He's not upset. He's just like, I just want attention, and this is the only way I know how to get attention.
Funny, they didn't tout this thing as a master thesis on feminism in the trailer. I can guarantee you they didn't put that. They're not going to put that on the poster, okay?
Because it's
a master thesis on feminism.
Because you're
come on, bring your kids. Up. You know a company is looking out for you when they actually upgrade your service and don't charge you for it.
No,
this is great news.
No commercial. No fucking commercial. No. No commercial. Hang on, still commercial. Oh, hang on.
Feminist Barbie. No mentions of patriarchy or male rage either in any of the marketing. It is, again,
because there's not
in the least bit surprising that these themes dominate the film. Not surprising to us anyway, as people who pay attention and are aware of what's...
You pay attention? You pay attention. You didn't even bother to see the movie that you're effing talking about. Oh my God. He's completely mischaracterizing the movie because he didn't go bother to see it. And now he's like, we're the ones that are paying attention. Bullshit. You are failing at quite literally your one effing job.
What's happening in the world and in our culture. But the average Barbie viewer is, on the other hand, oftentimes not so aware.
Really?
And that's why the sleight of hand trick.
Really? Well, it kind of seems to me that the average person who actually went to see the movie Barbie, Matt, would be much more aware of what is in the Barbie movie than a person who didn't even bother to go and see it.
Worked. Dangle a funny and fun and nostalgic and family-friendly Barbie film in front of the audience, and then when you have them in the seat, whack them over the head with the feminist stick.
That's not what happened.
Sell them the Barbie doll and let them open the package and find Gloria Steinem inside.
Literally not.
Now, we know about the aggressive, male-hating feminist bent of this film, thanks in part to some brave souls like Ben Shapiro who actually sat and endured it so they could report on its content.
God.
This is a form, I have to say, of journalistic courage far more impressive.
A form of journalistic courage. Can I would like one person to provide me with a single example that is actually from the Barbie movie of when Barbie is man-hating on Ken. Honestly, because there are no examples of it. Barbie didn't hate Ken. Barbie wanted Ken to be his own person and to stop being so fucking codependent.
Than reporters who cover war zones, especially the reporters in Ukraine right now. But we also know about the movie's real message from the generally positive reviews of liberal movie critics. The review in Variety gets into some of the details that the film's marketing material smartly glossed over. Quote, at the same time, Barbie is experiencing her rude awakening. Ken is busy filling his empty head with all the possibilities that patriarchy entails. In Barbie Land, Ken's job is a deliberately ill-defined afterthought, basically just beach. Whereas in the real world, dudes rule, an idea he takes back to Barbie Land with point.
Yes, and do you know what they're leaving out of that review? That when Ken tried to take advantage of the patriarchy in the real world, it didn't work. Ken tried to go get a job just by being a man, and he was basically told, no, you can't get a high-paying, high-powered job just because you're a man. You have to have degrees, you have to go to school, you have to do this, that, and the other thing. And Ken walked away with the conclusion that the real world had not implemented the patriarchy correctly because he thought that the patriarchy meant he could just walk into any organization and get a high-powered job just by being a man. And that's not the way it worked, because the movie says that the patriarchy is a made-up concept. And so then he went back to Barbie Land to implement the real patriarchy. It's kind of like a real socialism has never been tried thing. Except it's the real patriarchy has never been tried. Ken is the person that's going to bring the patriarchy to Barbie Land, and that doesn't work either. Why? Because the men didn't really want to be in charge. They just wanted more attention from the women. And at the end of the movie, the women decided that the men probably should be treated a lot better than they are and included in the operations of Barbie Land. Rottweiler, how frustrating. Walsh only says what he sees wrong with the movie without saying what he expected the movie to be. Family friendly is too vague. This is not a movie for young kids. And I don't agree with the notion that it was even marketed towards young kids. Again, this is a movie that was marketed towards women who played with Barbies growing up.
Absurd results, brainwashing all the women.
Yes. Barbie hated what Ken turned Barbie Land into, because when the men took over Barbie Land, they made a big goddamn mess. They ruined all the pretty decorations. They put horse shit not like literal horse shit, but horse stuff everywhere. The men destroyed the aesthetic beauty of Barbie Land, and the Barbies wanted it back.
Into behaving like obedient housewives. This is apparently the major.
Barbie Land basically looked like a frat. It was like a nice, beautiful sorority house where everything was in its place, and then the men come in and they turn it into a goddamn frat house. That was what happened.
Underlying theme in the movie: men in Barbie Land are useless and stupid, but then men in the real world are useless and stupid, but also violent, predatory, and in control of everything. Ken witnesses this dynamic and tries to export the patriarchy back to Barbie Land.
No.
And he
did not try to export the real world patriarchy to Barbie Land. He came to the conclusion that the real world had not done patriarchy correctly, and he was going to implement the idea correctly. This is an important point. Because the fact that patriarchy was not done correctly in the real world is like the writers of the movie saying patriarchy doesn't exist. It's not real. They don't have it right. This is not a real thing.
Call it the patriarchy in the film. That phrase is used many times.
So
I should mention that the Variety review is not entirely positive. Okay, to their credit, they do have some criticisms of the film, including, it takes issue with the movie and specifically with the way that men are portrayed. But the issue, according to film critic Peter DeBug, is that
even the Mattel CEO, The reason that the Mattel CEO had to go to Barbie Land was because, quite frankly, when the Kens took over Barbie Land, that had implications for the real world. It's not like these were like bad guys. They weren't. They were just like, we need to fix things because everything's about to go horribly wrong in the real world based on the men taking over Barbie Land and destroying everything. God damn it. I'm about to yell at Leslie sending in a super chat. Regardless of ideology, the plot was poorly written, the characters were not well developed, the ending made no sense. Leslie, it was make-believe as a child. Do children, when they're playing with dolls, write fully formed plots that have fully developed characters? No, they don't. Leslie is obviously conservative. If you're expecting a movie that is supposed to be reminiscent of playing with dolls as a child to have Oscar-worthy written plots, if that is your expectation, that is a misplaced expectation of a Barbie movie. But if you go in with the understanding that this movie is a nostalgic movie targeted towards women who played with Barbies growing up, then it makes sense because the plot of the movie and the characters of the movie are what little girls did with Barbies growing up. Thank you for the $5, Leslie, but I'm sorry. Your expectations on what the Barbie movie were going to be lead me to believe that you didn't bother to even watch a preview.
All of this time spent making men look terrible might risk taking the spotlight off of women. So there's nothing wrong with sending the message that all men are dumb pigs, but you should give them less screen time in the process, Peter says. Quote, it's upsetting in a useful way to see Barbie confronted with the overnight impact of rampant patriarchy, a concept that has rarely looked more off-putting than the frat boy fantasy caricatured here. Think of it as the misogynistic alternative marketed by old school beer commercials, the polar opposite of Mattel's mid-'80s "We girls can do anything, right, Barbie" campaign. While the Barbies plot to take back the government, Gerwig gives all the Ken dolls an over-the-top musical number, I'm Just Ken, which is so amusingly self-involved it risks subverting the very point the movie...
Yes, loquacious primate. This is an excellent point. There is no place for men in Barbie because little girls playing with Barbie don't understand men. They're trying to imagine what adults would do, but it comes through the lens of a little girl playing with Barbies.
He's trying to make. If Barbie is all about centering and celebrating women, why let Ken steal the show?
Ken didn't
So this
steal
is
the
the
show.
modern
Most of
media
the
for
movie
you. The
was
only
about
problem
Barbie.
with demonizing men is that it requires you to talk about men too much. And that's the Barbie movie for you too. Thousands of moms took their daughters to see this thing over the weekend. And, it is certainly a wonderful movie to show your daughter if you want your daughter to be a vapid, man-hating harpy. If that's your great dream for your daughter, then by all means, show them.
Again, if anyone is confused about why women don't like conservative men and why conservative men really just, give the impression that they don't like women, it's because Matt Walsh just said that any woman who enjoyed the Barbie movie is a feminist harpy. Just pro tip, conservatives, when you're comparing women to dogs or calling them feminist harpies because they had a childhood toy that they played with that you didn't play with because you're a man and it wasn't a toy that was made for you, and you call them dogs and fucking feminist harpies for enjoying reminiscing about those childhood memories, it doesn't come across well.
Greta Gerwig's Barbie. But this is not actually what most mothers want for their daughters. So for comparison's sake, Contrast this with the general public reaction when a movie wears its feminist credentials on its sleeve. Take the upcoming Snow White remake, for example. We've already seen how they traded in Snow White for Snow Brown, casting a Hispanic woman in the title role.
Oh, he's going to
And
be
for whatever
real
reason, they
pissed
decided
about.
that the most inclusive.
He's going to be so pissed about, oh my God, oh, a person that's not white cast in a traditionally and this is another thing too. Every time conservatives complain when an actor that's not white is cast in a role that used to be white, I'm sorry, it looks really effing petty. Who cares? Is this like, do you guys understand how racist this looks every single time it happens? If there's a Little Mermaid movie and the Little Mermaid is like in Jamaica, which I think is my impression of where that live action Little Mermaid movie was, and you are reeing and complaining about the fact that the Little Mermaid is black, they're in fucking Jamaica. What did you want? Like, what is the majority population in Jamaica? Like, stories are allowed to be told with different characters. And while I think remaking everything under the sun is bullshit, I think they should actually start making new stories instead of just telling the old story over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. It looks effing racist when all you focus on is, well, they dared cast a non-white actor in that role. Can you understand why to non-white people, like, that might come across as racist? I mean, even like, I'm pretty fucking white and that comes across as racist to me. It is a lazy effing complaint to make.
Approach is to take casting opportunities away from actors with dwarfism by turning the 7 dwarves into regular-sized carnies. But they're also changing the whole arc and theme of the story to make it more feminist, as this interview with the stars revealed. Watch.
You said you were bringing a modern edge to it on stage. What do you mean by that?
I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be if she was fearless, fair, brave, and true. And so it's just a really incredible story for, I think, young people everywhere to see themselves in.
It's not 1937 anymore. That's true. More's the pity. Now, we're not going to focus on the point that the taller woman there, Gal Gadot, is playing the evil queen, and the shorter one is playing Snow White. Now, remember that in the story, the queen is supposed to be jealous of Snow White's beauty. You know, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest one of all? And the mirror is supposed to tell her that it's Snow White. So we're supposed to buy that, okay? We're supposed to buy that Gal Gadot is asked who's the fairest one of all. And it's not her, it's Rachel Zegler. This is a real problem. Kind of hard to pull off in this case, as the evil queen is significantly more attractive than Snow White. But
is this serious? Is this like what he does all the time? God, this is why I don't ever, I'm so glad that I identified that Matt Walsh is an asshole so early on. Is this serious? This is what the Daily Wire talks about. Are you shitting me?
But, you know, putting that aside, the point is that the clip you just heard has been roundly mocked by nearly everyone. The movie is destined to be a worse flop than the woke Little Mermaid bastardization was. I mean, it's guaranteed to be a flop. Because nobody wants to see a fairy tale where the damsel in distress no longer needs saving and the central romance has been replaced with a dreary sermon about self-empowerment. Nobody wants to see.
See, and this is the real problem, isn't it? Matt Walsh doesn't want women to be self-empowered, because that's what Barbie is at the end of the day. Barbie was a toy that made young girls feel empowered, and they, like, in theory, grew up to be women who are more empowered because they played with Barbie, and that's why there are good memories about Barbie, because Barbie could be anything that you wanted it to be, and because Barbie could be anything, that meant you could be anything too. The whole point of all of this is, like, the reason Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro don't like these movies is because they don't want women to be self-empowered separately from whatever man they happen to be married to. And that's why they're so fucking offended. Even though Barbie did not treat Ken badly throughout that entire movie, this is why they are so offended that Ken was so codependent on Barbie, because it's not the man who is supposed to, like, not have an identity in connection with the woman. It is the woman who is supposed to not have an identity in connection with the man, and that's why they totally skip over the part at the end where Barbie tells Ken to go find himself separately from Barbie, because they don't want that. They want women to be completely defined by whatever man, either their father or later their husband, that they happen to be around.
Snow White become a corporate middle manager and achieve true happiness by moving into a 2-bedroom condo with her cat. They want to see her get saved by the prince and fall in love. That's what people want to see. When you advertise ahead of time that your film is going to go the former route rather than the latter, going the feminist route rather than the classic route, nobody will see it.
It was the classic
So
route.
feminism has to trick you. It has to smuggle itself in. It can't walk in the front door announcing its arrival, because people will scream and run out the back door away from it. And that's because, despite what Snow Brown claims, nearly all women innately desire a man to protect them and provide for them. That's what almost...
I told you. This is not a movie about, this is not about Barbie being too feminist. It's because Barbie didn't rely on Ken to protect her. That's what's got Matt Walsh's panties in a bunch. That's what's got Ben Shapiro's panties in a bunch. That's why they're arguing that this is a feminist movie when this is not a feminist movie. That's why they're arguing this is a woke movie when it is not a woke movie. They are arguing that it is woke for a woman to have an identity of their own and not want men to protect them. This is now the new conservative definition of woke. Is women empowered to be individuals, to do what they want in the world without men telling them what to do.
All women want. Women want to be swept off their feet by Prince Charming. That's why these stories have lived on for centuries and resonated with each new generation.
I agree.
The feminist fairy tale resonates with no one. It's a vision of what feminism wants women to do and what it wants women to think and what it wants women to want.
I agree with Space and Goats, and now I'm waiting for a super chat from Leslie, who I yelled at earlier. I was imagining something in the genre of Toy Story. Instead, I got Girl Interrupted with dolls. Leslie, if you really think that you got Girl Interrupted with dolls with the Barbie movie, then you are an idiot. I'm sorry. Thank you for the money. But if you think that movie was Girl Interrupted, A, you haven't actually seen or read the book, Girl Interrupted. B, that is one of the stupidest fucking things that I have heard all week. I am sorry. You clearly walked into that movie wanting to hate that movie because you have a political bias that you just needed to see something woke and feminist on the screen, probably because you watched the movie after you watched Ben Shapiro's review, and Ben Shapiro's probably one of your heroes. And so you saw exactly what Ben Shapiro wanted you to see because you are incapable of thinking for yourself and forming an independent assessment. I'm sorry. I don't normally call people who pay me money retarded, but this take is retarded. Shayna, these Daily Wire types want to get rid of no-fault divorce next, right? Oh, yes, they do. Which is a whole other thing that I'm not going to complain about today, Shayna. But yeah, they literally want men to own women. God.
But it will always ring false because it is false. Now, that's not to say that feminism hasn't won many disciples in the modern world. Obviously, it has. It has proven to be a devastating and lethal force, far deadlier than the bomb at the center of the other blockbuster this weekend. Feminism has killed 60 million babies, and that's just the beginning of the destruction that it has wrought on the world. But it wins adherents through brainwashing, intense and constant indoctrination, especially in public schools, and by playing on a woman's resentment and hatred and self-pity and desire to blame others for her problems.
There was no resentment or hatred or self-pity in the entire Barbie movie. Barbie never resented Ken. Barbie never resented men in general. Barbie wanted to be left alone to live a happy fucking Barbie life in Barbie land.
This can work in the culture. Unfortunately, it doesn't really work as a fairy tale because fairy tales are aspirational and fanciful and whimsical. Feminism, on the other hand, is base and vulgar and hateful. And it also doesn't work in marketing materials for a film based on a beloved children's toy. That's why they hid it away, tucked it under all the pink and plastic, and then came out with the man-hating sledgehammer when the audience was already sitting in the seats.
There was no
So the only question
sledgehammer in the entire
is whether
movie.
those mothers who took their daughters then, to see this film, did they then spend the whole ride home explaining why all that stuff in the movie was wrong?
Probably not.
Better yet, as soon as they saw
Because
what was
there was
really
nothing
happening,
wrong.
did they grab their daughter by the hand and leave the theater before the movie ended? Or were they too obtuse to notice the toxic feminist message even when it was delivered with a sledgehammer?
My God.
Or were many of these mothers already man-hating feminists themselves, and so they didn't see any problem with it? I suspect a mix of all these options has played out this past weekend, but I hope there were plenty in the first category. And for any parents who hadn't yet taken their daughters to see this movie, but planned on going in the future, well, now you know better. Thanks for checking out this video.
That is one of the most retarded things I have ever seen in my life. It's really something when these assholes get caught directly in the act. When you go and see something, and I want to highlight this, chat. Hang on, where was it? Pamela said, at the end of the day, I just want to be entertained. Why can't we just see movies for what they're supposed to be? If the Daily Wire kept their opinions to themselves about a movie that wasn't made for men, if Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro had kept their opinions to themselves, if they had said, you know what, this is a woman's movie, we're not going to weigh in because it's a woman's space and we don't want to intrude on women's spaces, just like we've been telling trans women not to intrude in women's spaces, we're not going to intrude either. If they just kept their nose out of it, the vast majority of people, and I'm sorry, the vast majority of conservatives who went to see this movie would have just been entertained. This was not a movie about feminism. This was a movie that called the patriarchy a myth. This was a movie in which ended with the notion that men and women should probably treat each other better. This was a nostalgic movie that was made for people who played with Barbies growing up. And if the men would keep their goddamn noses out of it because they don't understand it in the first place, then everyone who goes to see it would just be able to enjoy it because it was a great movie. I'm sorry. It was a great movie. I laughed. I literally cried. I enjoyed it. It was completely not woke. It had a great message. It made you feel good. It looked great. For people who actually played with Barbies growing up and understand what that is, that script was perfect. Margot Robbie was perfect. Ryan Gosling was perfect. Everything about that movie was perfect. I wouldn't change anything. I would probably go see it again if I had a reason to go see it again. I'm not even joking about that. It was a great effing movie, and it could have just been something that was nice for everyone. And guess what? There were enough messages in that movie that conservatives could have lifted up. Like, for example, the part where they said the patriarchy is a made-up concept. They could have said, look, this is a movie that's calling the patriarchy a made-up concept. Why didn't they do that? Because Barbie is about empowering women and making women feel good. And as men who believe that women need to attach themselves to a man in order to feel good, they just couldn't effing handle it. There is no greater proof that the patriarchy is a real thing than the fact that Ben Shapiro and Matt Walsh think that their perspective on Barbie is the only perspective on Barbie that actually effing matters. And I think you should go and watch it and judge it for yourself. But if you are not a person who played with Barbies growing up, it is not a movie that's been made for you. You probably wouldn't understand it. It's just the way it goes. I didn't really play with G.I. Joes all that much. I did a little bit. And guess what? Because I barely even touched G.I. Joes growing up, do you know what movies I didn't see and didn't expect to be made for me? G.I. Joe. I was not excited about the G.I. Joe movies. I didn't go see the G.I. Joe movies. I don't care about the G.I. Joe movies because I didn't play with G.I. Joes growing up. Anyway, guys, that's all I have for today. I think that is enough of a rant. Now, as a reminder, we will be back at 5 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow for Happy Hour. And Happy Hour is a stream that we do on Fridays specifically, where we watch a woke training from start to finish. And we talk about it, and we have some beers. And I'm going to go get some good craft beers, and we're going to talk about that. But guys, that is all I have for right now. Please do mount that like button on the way out the door. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Yes, Trendolin, I'll do the whatever podcast. I swear. I swear I'll do it, Trendolin. I just don't know when. Maybe tonight. Who knows? Maybe it'll be a late night stream, Trendolin. Keep an eye out. All right, guys, that's all I got for right now. We'll see you next.